Okay, hello. It's time to talk about my April reading, which was not particularly impressive. Okay, so I finished 4 books in April. It's like partially the fault of Lolita, but not entirely. So I read most of Lolita in April, and it took time, And then it was due back at the library, and it was, it was on Libby, so it just gets sucked back out of your phone when it's due, and I'm waiting in line to get it again. So my thoughts and feelings on Lolita will have to wait. But I just feel like that was not a good way to begin the month, reading-wise. Okay, so I read 4 books. And I'm gonna start by talking about 2 of them because they're a duology. That being A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine, and the sequel, A Desolation Called Peace, which I don't have because it's from the library. I love this book. I love this book so much that I reread it in preparation for reading the sequel. And it's so good. All right, so this is science fiction, and I would call it a space opera, I think. It is about an ambassador who travels to the capital of this giant space empire. And she comes from, obviously not the space empire, she comes from a small space station that is naturally worried that the space empire is going to take over the station, is going to encroach, because there's not really much they could do to prevent it. So Mahit Dismar is sent as the ambassador, but she's the second ambassador from LaSalle Station, because the first one, who's been there for 20 years, has stopped taking calls. Like, he hasn't responded. They don't know really what's going on with him. So they send Mahit as a replacement because the Empire has requested a replacement but hasn't given it any explanation. So they're like, okay. The fun thing about LaSalle Station is they have a practice of, what should I call it? They have these things called imago machines, and they're inserted in like the base of the skull, and they can contain the memories and some of the personality of another person. So they distribute them along the lines. So like if you're the best pilot of one generation, maybe you get the imago line of the best pilot of the previous generation, and it's like 14, I think, is the most generations that would be within a particular line, because that's how long they've been doing this. So Mahit is given an out-of-date imago with some of the memories of Iskander Agavan, who was the previous ambassador, but it's out of date because it's from like 15 years ago. So, because like he hasn't been back to like re-download his brain or whatever. Anyway, so that's kind of the basic setup. Is she arrives on the world, the capital world of the Empire, and finds out that Iskander is dead. They say it was an allergic reaction, and she's like, okay, it seems like he was probably murdered, but thanks. And, immediately she's thrust into this complicated scenario where she doesn't know what Iskander was really up to. It seems like he was up to something, because people keep saying cryptic shit to her and that she doesn't really understand. And the other issue is there's something wrong with her imago. Not just that it's out of date, but there's something wrong with it. The younger Iskander in her head freaks out when he sees the dead Iskander, and he vanishes, and she can't get him to come back, but she's like, that's not how this is supposed to work. And eventually finds out there was sabotage. So anyway, whatever, I don't need to tell you the whole plot. The point is, it's great. There's a lot of politics. There's I love the world building. It's not alien. There's aliens in the sequel. But let me finish talking about this one first. So aliens exist in this world, but there's like one kind of alien, and we never meet one. So like, it's basically just humans, but with different cultures. I really enjoy like everything about this book. Really, like, the idea of Mahit's relationship to the Empire, because she has been, since childhood, she has been fascinated with their culture, and yet at the same time, they're like actively, or at least potentially actively, passively at the moment, trying to take over hers. So it gives a complicated feeling. So in the sequel, A Desolation Called Peace, it's set a few months after this book, and basically in this book we find out that there are some aliens looming, destroying ships on the borders of space near LaSalle Station. And in the sequel, this becomes the plot. Like, these aliens are out there, the Empire sends a legion or whatever to check it out and try and figure out what is going on there. So it's a first contact with alien story. The aliens are very alien and interesting, and Mahit ends up in the middle of all of that. I don't want to get into too many details, but it's great. I just feel like I'm not selling it. I don't feel like I'm good at selling these things, but this book is, okay. I would say that I prefer A Memory Called Empire of the two. But, you know, naturally, I was worried that I wouldn't like A Desolation Called Peace, because this was like my favorite book the year it came out. I mean, it would suck to not like the sequel, but I did. I thought it was very good. One thing that was weird, that was different between the two. This book is told entirely from Mahit's perspective, in third person. And the sequel has like 4 different perspective characters, one of which is Mahit. And I was like, oh, this is odd. And it works, but I don't know that I would say it was necessarily a good idea. Like, I don't know. It's complicated. I think it's an odd choice to make, right? To just, because, okay, I've read plenty of series where perspective characters will change between books, but I don't think I've read one where one book is just one perspective and then it branches out to multiple. Like if you look at The Expanse, the first book has 2 perspectives, and then if the second book has like 4 or 5, yeah, that's more, but I feel like it's less of a difference because you're already like, well, there's multiple perspectives anyway. You know what I mean? So I think that's a weird choice, but it works. She says awkwardly. I don't know. I feel like there were elements of plot that we were getting from, well, we were getting elements of plot from one of those perspectives that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise, but I don't know. I mean, it was probably a tough decision, but it was fine. It was a good book. Let's stop talking about it for now. I don't know if it's going to have a third book. There's part of me that is like, this is a good ending, but I also thought this book had a good ending, so who the hell knows? But there's also the potential for, emotionally at least, between the characters for a third book. Plot-wise, I'm not sure what it would be about. It was more obvious what the second book would be about. When you finished this one, it was like, it's probably like those aliens, that's kind of a threat. But when you get to the end of the second book, it's like, well, I don't really know what the plot might be of a third book. But emotionally, there's the whole thing between Mahit and Three Seagrass, and it's like, where is that going to go? I need to mention that these books are sapphic, because that is definitely a point in their favor. And they're great. Okay. What next? Well, there's not much else, right? I have 2 other books to talk about, which were both nonfiction. So let's start with The Body by Bill Bryson. I read his book, what is it? A Brief History of Nearly Everything, or something like that, some years ago, and I loved it. But I haven't really wanted to read one of his other books. But I thought, you know what, The Body looks fun because it's about the human body. It's called A Guide for Occupants. And it's pretty good. There were, I guess I felt like because it covers so much, it doesn't have time to delve into anything really deeply. I also kind of wish there was less people are too fat in it. Like, it's like, yeah, okay, so talk about something more interesting. Like, I guess what I really want out of a book about the human body is, I want the details. How does it work? Oh man. Like, just give me some, you know, give me the stats, give me the dimensions, give me the actual information about how like cells, different kinds of cells work and how the organs function. And it's like, that's not really what this is. No one else wants that. Go take physiology again. It's like, no. Ugh, I loved human physiology. Can I just say that was a great class? Okay. But The Body was a good book. Generally. It was just, I feel like, you know, one of those nonfictions that I listened to, because I listened to it, that I'm not going to really think about much now that I'm done. But it was a good way to spend a couple of weeks of listening to audiobook time. Okay, and then the other nonfiction was Cultish by Amanda Montell. So Cultish is a fair, well, it's from last year, so it's pretty new. These are all pretty new books, honestly. It was really the month of reading like newer stuff and just kind of ignoring every decade before the 20th century. But the 21st century, what the fuck am I saying? I mean, I was also ignoring everything before the 20th, but whatever. All right, so Cultish has a really great cover. It's kind of psychedelic looking. It's got a alien spacecraft on it. But it is about the language of cults. That's essentially what she's talking about. She's got this kind of theory that it's interesting just to look into how how language works in cults, because they use it to control their members. And it is interesting because, like, okay, so for a while now, basically, I mean, since it started, I've been listening to Scientology Fair Game podcast with Mike Rinder and why do I not remember her name? What is wrong with me? Leah Remini. Jesus Christ. Leah Remini and Mike Rinder. And, you know, honestly, it's because they haven't come out with a new one in a couple months, and I'm like, I'm waiting, guys. But anyway, great podcast. Very in-depth talking about Scientology. But, yeah, one of the interesting things that comes up a lot in that podcast is how they have all these terminologies for all of these different crazy Scientology things, right? And they have to constantly be like, Leah especially is always like, don't talk in the Scientology like language, like people will not understand what you're saying, you know. But they could, like, them and their guests, they could just like go on in this practically this other language, like using all these acronyms and shit. And so she talks about stuff like that in the book. I think that if you want a book that's really going to give you like the skinny on a bunch of different weird cults, this is not exactly it, because she only really focuses on a few. However, it is interesting because she has a whole chapter on MLMs and a whole chapter on fitness cults. And so basically she's talking about different kinds of cults, but they're not all equally dangerous, right? But they have similar ways of using language and of acting on people. So I think that's interesting. And it was pretty good. I appreciated, you know, that she talked about MLMs. And I appreciated, I don't know, what am I saying? It was good. It was a good book. It was, yeah, so like overall, you know, it was a reading month of really not reading a lot of books, not finishing a lot of books, but they were successful. I didn't dislike any of them. And, you know, I mean, finally reading a Desolation called Peace, like, I have been wanting to read it since it came out. I'm just really slow. Like, it was published in 2021, so it's not like it's been that long, but I'm not the kind, I've just never had the capacity to just grab a book as soon as it comes out and read it. I'm always like, oh no, I need to wait for some unknown reason. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. May, I mean, I'm not very far in, but I'm reading some more stuff, some variety of things. a little bit different. And it would be great if I could finish Lolita, because then I could fucking talk about it before I forget everything. But I guess we'll find out in a month, in May, whether that happened or not. Bye.